It was one of the worst peacetime disasters in the Navy's history. In 1932, an experimental submarine sank during manoeuvres off the Dorset coast.
The M2 went down a few miles west of Portland. All 60 of her crew were lost. 75 years after the sinking, descendants of those who died have commemorated what happened. Martin Dowse reports.
A team of divers takes the plunge a couple of miles off the Dorset coast for a very special expedition organised by the Nautical Archaeology Society. Some are leisure divers, some Royal Navy divers, one an expert on submarine wrecks. Minutes later, in the murky depths, they find what they're looking for, a site unique anywhere in the world. Here is the final resting place of the M2 submarine, which went down with all hands 75 years ago. The M2 was unlike anything that had put to sea before. Military technology was going through a very experimental phase in the 1930s, but even so, the idea behind this sounds almost crackpot beyond belief: to have a submersible aircraft carrier.
It is incredible to think that you could, in 1930, provide an aircraft hangar with a seal on it that would keep an aircraft dry on a submarine. I mean, it is amazing to reflect on that. So, to that extent, it may seem foolhardy, but they were pushing the boundaries of what they knew, both in terms of operating aircraft, fighting, but also in industrial design and materials and technology.
Perhaps this time those boundaries of innovation were pushed that bit too far. The M2 was supposed to surface, open a watertight hangar door and launch a reconnaissance plane from a huge catapult. They were practicing this launch off Portland when the disaster happened.
To do that, it meant that the submarine was actually holding itself on the surface using its engines, and it wasn't like fully buoyant. So in the event of there being a problem, say the engines failed or there's a hydraulic failure, the submarine would just slip backwards and any open hatches would just take in water. And that may have been what happened.
Over the years, the M2 has become one of the most popular dives off the south coast. This visit to the wreck, though, was not about pleasure, but remembrance. 60 sailors and airmen lost their lives sealed within this steel tomb. Stoker Jack Lewis, in his early 20s, was one of them. Though she never knew him, his great-niece Julie felt it important to be part of the remembrance.
Servicemen back then didn't get the sort of recognition as they do now for sort of standing for their country. So it's going to be nice that it's going to be remembered today. Sort of going to do it for my grandfather more than anything. It's very close to my grand, so it's sort of going to be something that's going to stick in my mind for a long time.
Down on the wreck, a white ensign was attached and unfurled by the divers. Up above, a Fleet Air Arm Lynx with Julie on board flew in over the marker buoys and a wreath was dropped. 60 brave servicemen finally getting public recognition of the sacrifice they made 75 years before.
If a British submarine was to sink with its entire crew now, you can just imagine what an event that would be for the media. So if you look back to the 1930s and the newspaper coverage that existed at the time of this, it was a national tragedy and a very, very sad event, which is still remembered by people that were around then. And, you know, it's nice 75 years after the event for us to get together and commemorate that.
Martin Dowse off the Dorset coast for Meridian Tonight.
Very sad, remembering 60 very brave men.
Certainly makes you think, doesn't it, what